All right. Here we are again. Now, this game is really good because you attack and you attack and you attack and you attack. And this was played by Kotov and Unziker. Kotov was playing the white pieces. Opens with the queen pawn. Knight f6. We could be seeing a king's Indian from black. c4. Nope, not a king's Indian this time. It's all good. Knight c3 and bishop b4. So we can see he's putting the pin on the king and he's going to develop his pieces speedily, which is a wonderful way to do this. e3, he is supporting his center. White has a better center as far as occupation with the pawns, and then no sooner than I say that, then black brings out the d5, which is a good move. Switch pins here, and now a3. He's going to put the question to the bishop. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, he exchanges. Now, the way this changes the board dynamic, he can no longer hit this or this square. So this definitely changes the nature of the influence in the center. He does have the doubled pawns. They are up a little bit, and there is still some tension here. It's okay to leave the tension. That doesn't hurt you at all. And now again, Unziker brings up the c5. So they're definitely fighting for the center. And the way the pawns exchange here, let's see this. C takes the d5, and the e will take the d5. So a little bit of tension. And now is released, and now the d3. He's going to bring in his pieces as fast as he can. And through the mobilization of the pieces, the development, tuck your king away. That's what you want to do. And yet, bring out more pieces. You got to bring out more pieces. The b6 will give an impetus to open up the center because the king is still in the center. He's not going to be for very long, though. It's kind of interesting how this works. He castles. And so there is some good tension, good fighting for the center. And the bishop will come to a6, directly challenging the white squared bishop. And frankly, it is the dark squares that the pawns are on. So the dark squared bishop is the bad bishop, but they're going to trade the good bishops, which is kind of interesting. Bishop a6, and of course, the knight will take. And now f3. He is still attempting to maintain control of important, critical central squares. Hold on, I just heard my heater start turning on, and I don't want it to interrupt me. So I got to turn it off. I forgot about that. I apologize. So they're still leaving tension, but white is trying to assure that he is keeping track of very important central squares. So he is doing some pawn pushing. He's doing some pawn bumping. A lot of pawn moves here. Knight's going to come back to b8 because he didn't want to be on the rim. We all know that. Knight on the rim is dim. So here comes the queen. Now, in pushing the queen, yes, he still has his bishop, but in pushing the queen, the idea is to connect the rooks, and that's what he's going to do. And the rook, of course, is going to grab the partial file. That makes sense. That's where it belongs. The knight's going to relocate over toward the kingside. The knight is going to finally get to the better square that it wants to be on. And my suspicion is because of the way these pawns and now the queen are all focusing on these central squares, this whole cluster of central squares with the knight helping out here also. The knight really does want to be up in here because if you don't fight for the center, and again, coming straight through the center, this pawn is supporting this pawn, which is hitting this square. If you're not going to fight for the center, you're not going to win. We all know that by now. There's no question. So knight c6 is a much better placement than over here on the rim. Bishop to b2, grabbing the fianchetto so that when this pawn moves, or if there is an exchange of pawns, that's going to be a beautiful diagonal. So that's a good move. Now, notice how black is putting all of his pieces into this. Rook's on the open files like crazy, absolutely. And white is not going any less speed or power. He's going to bump his rooks. Now, he doesn't have the open files, but what he's going to do. So here's the key. Once you get the rook over there and you're joining the other rook, now you've relocated your knight over to the G3 square, and your queen is pointing over toward the king side. White is building up for a king side. That doesn't even have to be a hush hush secret. It's not like he's trying to be sneaky. He's basically saying, here I come, get ready. I hope you've got what it takes. Because what he's noticing is the knight here. The knight can come over here pretty quick, 2 moves. The rook, the queen does have the diagonal. And the rook, it just seems like the majority of power is away from the king, not aiming toward protecting the king. The majority of power of the white is all shifted toward the king. So this is why Kotov, as the white, begins to attack, and he does a really good job of this. I really like how he does this. And he is aware of that. See, his reaction, 8-6, you know something's coming. He's aware of that, and he's also aware that, man, I have been pushing pawns. Isn't it so interesting? Because both of them have been pushing pawns. Everybody's pushing pawns, and they're trying to cover the E4, F4, D4, C4, D5, E5. They're trying to cover everything from both directions with their pawns, and yet it doesn't seem like the development of black is set up for either an attack or defense. Isn't that fascinating how that works like that? So white pushes the E4 one more time. Now, the rooks are in place, but you can't attack the king if he's protected. And there's no weaknesses over here by the king other than this h-pawn, so it does weaken this square a little bit, but he does have a good defender here. And technically the rook's here and the queen's close, right? So the thing is, you have to break open the center. You have to break open the king and the center. Go through the center is the best way. So let's see if he can pull this off. And black is going to start plinking off his pawns also. Opening up the C file, and look who has the C file, the black rook. Yeah. And then the D will take E4. And the F will take E4. After all that exchange, white's got the 2 powerful central pawns. And those can really do damage if he gets them marching up that field. And look at this. Very clever way to get your knight in there, because the pawn is not going to take the knight because white is getting ready to attack. And when you attack, you want to keep your queen. So you're not going to want to exchange queens. You've got your bishop. Focus that direction. Actually, this is awfully tempting to do that, to continue opening up that bishop too. No, don't change the queens. To change the queens would not work. And in fact, he does bring the queen back. But now, this looks like a retreat. It's not a retreat. You come back to here so that he can come up to here. The angle from here is not speedy enough. The knight's in the way. He's got to bump up in here, right? And it's not far enough up the board, so bop the lady down and then come up here to the h5 area. That's what he's trying to do. Now, the knight is trying to stay activated and at least attacking some of the pieces. Now, this is crazy because white, all of his pieces almost are back on the very first rank. I think that is so fascinating to see. But, you know, at this point, black's position, the guy has nothing. He really doesn't. Yeah, he's got a couple of knights out in the field. One's doing defense. This one just, it has no targets. It has no reason to even be there technically. The rook is supporting it, but there's nothing here that's happening. So there's two pieces that are just simply dead. The queen is back on her home square. Okay, she's keeping an eye on the pawn across from the queen. She can't come up into here because of the knight, and the knight has to stay put to defend the king. The rook is touching this pawn, keeping his eye on this pawn, but this rook is behind the pawn, and so he can push that pawn just as hard as he wants. This rook is on the partial open file, and it extends up to the f7, which can be made into a target. So the black position is just defense, if you can even call it that. The white position is poised to attack. Let me show you what I mean. And sure enough, knight h7. He's going to bump the knight back. Okay, you got the two central pawns. Use them, of course. Yeah, that's the rule. Just bump those pawns. Push, 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 push. Go, man, go. Go, man, go. Go, man, go. In fact, he's going to blockade that. He knows, oh man, I do not want him to start taking that F pawn and leave that open file here for the rook to the king. Not happening. So blockade the pawn. But again, it is a defensive maneuver that the rook is having to get, right? Well, rook e4. What's he trying to do? Push the pawn harder and further? No. Notice this real cool move for white. Now, that's a good move for black too, but the cool move for white is a rook lift because he's going to attack the king, right? So this is important. Now, the knight is going to relocate to f8, which is going to help him do some defense, he's hoping. Yeah. And here we go. Usually a kingside attack will begin with a knight sacrifice. Sometimes you get a bishop sacrifice or one of each, or pawn sacrifices, so that your heavy pieces who are going to do the lifting can get in there and checkmate. So with the knight coming up, here we go. We're about to see potentially some sacrifices going, and black knows it. Put the king away. Here we go. Queen h5. Okay, the attack begins. You're not going to get to the king without breaking it open. You're not going to break it open without sacrifices. We already all know that. So rook to c7. Now this is a good move because he's going to guard his second rank. And of course, these pawns are the ones that's going to be attacked because you have to crack the king open. So this is a good defensive maneuver. Right? So he's trying his best to do his best. And now, absolutely, the rook lift. He came up, supporting his pawn. Now, in the attack, now that he's on the attack, he doesn't have to worry as much about supporting his central pawns, right? Yes, it's being attacked and all. It's guarded, you know. Nothing is really attacking this except the queen. And that puts a check on, but you've got the bishop to come up and block with a tempo. And so there's not a lot of attack options for black right now. So knight now comes back over to h7. Yeah, because of the rook, right? Now we see the sacrifice. Knight begins cracking the king open. Knight takes g7. You can't just not take the knight because the checkmate will come very, very much faster. So the king takes the knight. Knight is out of there, and now the bishop, the final piece that he hasn't developed, he's been slow in developing it, and yet it's been creating a spectacular influence because the field is basically open. And now he comes and also eliminates one of the protectors of the king. Check. The king will drop straight back to g8. So you have all your power there. Once you begin doing forcing moves, once you begin attacking the king, you want to keep doing forceful moves. So what do we see? Well, you're not going to do the queen there, no, for a check. You're not going to bump the queen here, no, for a check because of the knight. But you do have the rook, so bump it over, check, right? Well, the nice thing is he also had the rook that he was able to do a rook lift with, right? So that's a nice block. So he does have a few defenders, and now white seals the deal here because you've got your heavy pieces in, you've sacrificed a couple of pieces, and now you can keep right on pushing that pawn. The power of the central pawns is displayed here. These guys kept moving. Actually, it was through exchange off the F file that he regained the E pawn. And once you got the E pawn, what do you do with the central pawns? You push. Absolutely. It gains more space, but it attacks. So he undermines the rook, and now there's nothing black can do. So he resigns. It's checkmate in just a few moves. So that is a spectacular game to yet again once show us how to attack and how to put your pieces together in a coordinated effort. So fun stuff. The main ingredient is, of course, dominating the center, fighting for not only just you can occupy the center, which white ended up doing, Kotov, with the pawns, but he didn't just leave them there. He kept pushing into the enemy territory, absolutely, but also utilizing your pieces in a coordinated manner. So this is good stuff. This is really good stuff. Fun stuff. Thanks for watching the Backyard Professor videos. Much more to come. Stay tuned. Have a great evening, everybody, and I will catch you in the next video very soon. Be well, do good, have fun, make lots of friends. I know I keep saying that, but it is funner to have friends. Do it.